Hi, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. I know people are still joining. I wanted to welcome everyone to this webinar, the new live engagement program, Virtual is Here to Stay. My name is Tina McCorkindale, and I'm the president and CEO of the Institute for Public Relations. We're a nonprofit research foundation that is devoted to the PR and corporate comms practice. So before we begin, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping rules. I'm sure you've heard them all before with the other programs you've attended. We will have time for Q&A with our speaker at the end of the webinar. If you look at the bottom of the screen, there is a Q&A box. If you have any questions, please feel free to enter them into this box. We will collect them and then moderate the Q&A at the end of the webinar. Please ask your questions in the Q&A and not the chat, as sometimes questions get lost in the chat, and we want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to be heard. You can also use the chat function to comment, say hi, interact with other attendees, or share any resources. We'll compile everything and send them to you in the next couple days with the playback. This session is being recorded, and we will we'll also send a post-event survey. So let's get to it. During the past year, meeting and event professionals across the globe were forced to adapt to the new normal of virtual events, and we were no exception. Though we missed our in-person meetings, definitely hybrid has been an advantage to connect people globally all over when we couldn't be together in person. So you'll learn some tips and best practices on how to deliver great events that your attendees will love. So leading today's webinar is Cvent Vice President of Product Management, McNeil Kennan. I will also say that Cvent is our partner, and they power all of our hybrid events and our sole virtual events, including our very popular masterclass series. They've been wonderful to work with. So we're thrilled to have them speak today about all their insights about virtual events and some learnings that you all will find very useful. So thank you so much for being here today, McNeil, and I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina. Excited to be here. I'm excited to share some insights of what we've seen happening in that world of virtual. So why don't we go ahead and hop in? We should be talking about, 35, 40 minutes. And then we'll open it up for question and answer. And as Tina mentioned, we'll make sure to type those questions in. I may even pick up some of them along the way. The title of today's talk is the new live engagement program, Virtual is Here to Stay. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means. But first, let's go back to kind of what we all just went through. I know not many want to relive it. But you think about some of the most successful event organizers, roll the clock back to 2019, they were the ones that were able to really kind of put themselves in the shoes of their audience, right? They displayed great empathy for their user experience. Now, I tend to speak in technology terms, but really their user is the attendee. And so they would design for the experience that those attendees would have. So it might look like it would have been a room like this, or maybe a room like this. But all of a sudden, COVID happened, and very differently, the audience experience tended to look something like this, right? The cup of coffee, the laptop, the ubiquitous AirPods. But the reality is it probably wasn't such a clean experience. It probably looked a little more like this, right? With all the various distractions from working from home that may come up, in addition to demands from working remotely, right? So you've got those kind of home, work, and virtual event life balance concerns. And so it was a new challenge to really command that attention. Some of these stats here are no surprise. Some of them are even quite dated in September. Basically everyone did have to go virtual. But they uncovered, some new things. They kind of began to realize, hey, I can get a lot more reach with virtual. I'm not having to ask as much of my audience to physically travel to my event. And maybe I'm not going to ask them for as much time. So I was able to get more people from more geographies, including international, to come and learn about my, whatever that message was going to be. And we're seeing people understand that value, and not so much as a replacement for in-person, but really as a way to augment their live engagement channel. And we're seeing people starting to build long-term programs, regardless of what's going to happen or when they can return to those in-person events. So, what historically were three mutually exclusive channels: the webinar, your video content you might post on your .com site or even YouTube, your in-person events, have now converged into really one program or one channel, and that's live engagement. And we're seeing that have an impact on a lot of areas in the technology landscape, right? You usually had 3 different sets of technology vendors that never the two should meet. Now are all colliding. When you're looking at your organizational structures, you're seeing entirely new teams form because they need a cohesive strategy across this one live engagement channel. So today, this is kind of how we're going to break it down. We'll look at the state of virtual itself and some of the key event technology trends. We'll look at how the return of in-person is going to shape that virtual experience. Sometimes you may run a pure virtual event. Other times you may be offering a virtual experience alongside the in-person experience for those that can't attend face-to-face. And then we'll look at, okay, if we do have this one unified live engagement channel, what does that really mean for this era of live engagement? What new opportunities can we now uncover with this ability to connect with people in a live format way more often than we ever have been able to before? So why don't we start with just looking at the state of virtual itself? First and foremost, we are seeing the trends and the feedback surveys coming back saying virtual really is here to stay. We asked a study in conjunction with Forrester Consulting just earlier this year in February. We asked, what types of external events is your organization going to plan post-pandemic? And the vast majority was saying, hey, it's going to be pretty much an even balance. We're going to plan all 3 types of events: in-person, hybrid, and virtual events going forward. Now, what we think we're seeing is not so much that virtual events are displacing in-person. We still think that the main reason that in-person events aren't happening is the more obvious public safety concerns. Though certainly there's a light at the end of that tunnel already happening today, especially in North America. But really, virtual events are really displacing the webinar. When we asked people what kinds of virtual events they did before the pandemic, most admitted, hey, 79% said, my virtual events were really just webinars. And there was kind of a problem with webinars. It was that voice over the PowerPoint. It didn't offer a really high level of engagement. And so I always kind of say it's like the Wizard of Oz, right? That big booming voice, the man behind the curtain, which appeared to be quite powerful. But once the wizard was revealed, he was revealed to not be as powerful as, of course, Dorothy and the team thought they once were. And I think a lot of that happened with webinars, is where we thought they were effective, but the reality was virtual revealed them to not be as effective as we thought before. And the way that they're more effective is we're thinking of webinars as virtual events. And that means that it's going to capture more multimodal engagement. It may have a live streaming component. It may have on-demand components. It may have interactive and networking types of components where it's not just one-way information sharing, but there's ways for the audience to connect with the speaker. There's ways for the audience to connect with each other, and potentially, if sponsors are involved, ways for sponsors to tap into that kind of community that the organizer is building and helping bring together. And so this deeper level of engagement yields much higher impact results, like accelerated pipeline. So the more we think of these these webinars as virtual events, we start to think about a different strategy to be successful with them. Now, first is, what technology can you use to create that impactful virtual event? Well, first of all, there's just some key trends, right? As Gen Z enters the workforce, they're adopting video, whether that's video production or video consumption, or likely both, at rates we've never seen before in other age cohorts. So whether that's Snapchat, Instagram, YouTube, the vast majority of Gen Z is interacting with these tools on a daily or weekly basis. We're also seeing the rise of live stream consumption. So Twitch is a super popular platform originally just to watch people play video games. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, just watching other people play video games. And it sounds like something maybe only high schoolers would do, but the reality is over 59% of Twitch users are over the age of 25. So there is this incredible demand to consume all forms of live stream content online. But there's new ways to transform that content, right? It's not just a screen share. And so this is some of the more forward-leaning things, but we've talked a lot about uh, you know, augmented reality in the context of in-person events. And we always pictured our attendees kind of walking around, holding up their phone and seeing that kind of virtual layer on top of that in-person environment. But what if we applied augmented reality to the speaker environment? There's a great example in the Snap Partner Summit in June of 2020, where Evan Spiegel, the CEO, was speaking, and he was speaking on a stage, an amphitheater down by the beach with these great kind of cool floating displays. Of course, the only thing real was Evan Spiegel himself. Everything else was an augmented environment down to him casting his shadow on it. And so you start to think about ways to transform that remote speaker environment itself. For example, we could even do it ourselves here. And maybe I'll stop the share. But it's pretty easy to see. Maybe I shouldn't have left my beard. I could have maybe shaved it off a little bit. And let's see here. Yeah, and I'll just hit it right in my hand. And you can start to transform speaker environments with augmented reality. Now, maybe I'm going to go ahead and put it back on, but there might be, a cat that happens to jump onto my head as well. And I could do the whole presentation that way. But it's just a good example of ways that you can transform that speaker environment. So let's go back to sharing here. All right. So that's all just with augmented reality technology and really using virtual cameras as an input to your live stream production. Now, it's not just going to be augmented reality. That, of course, is a little bit more forward leaning. But there's new technologies that allow you to create broadcast level production with self-service web-based technology. So you don't need a $10,000 mixing board like they'd have down at the news agency, news desk, where they're producing their news every night. You can use a web-based technology to actually create those lower thirds, to create dynamic layouts and really keep that image moving throughout the entire production. Now, many of these tools started as a ways to help these very popular gamers up-level that experience that they were streaming out to their audience. But we've since seen this be very prevalent in the B2B space and ways that you're going to be able to create a more compelling broadcast to your audience, right? They're not going to really want just that one layout for an hour or multiple hours throughout the day. And so this just gives you a sense of what the tool could look like, right? You've got all of your remote speakers there on the left. You can control your various layouts. You can provide that single pane of glass for your speakers so that they can interact with the audience. They see all the inbound questions as they're coming through, or the poll results. If you ask for a poll, or I can easily queue an on-demand video and stream it right to my audience as well. So live stream production is something that's changed rapidly in the last year. Now, I talked about that single pane of glass, really kind of one tool to present and interact with the audience, because after all, that's really what an event is about. It's about that interactivity between speaker and audience. One example, and this took a pretty big budget, of breaking through that barrier was Tony Robbins in one of his earlier virtual events in 2020, of how he made it a truly kind of interactive environment. So I'll share you just a 1-minute video of what. So just a really great example to make it truly interactive, with getting your audience on camera, getting them participating with each other and with the speaker. Now, there's other ways to build that sense of community, and really that sense of community needs to come from, hey, it's not just info sharing to an audience, but it's about people being able to contribute and contribute value to each other, right? It's a much more organic, and that's really the nature of community. And so a lot of ways to do that in the virtual space is through video conferencing technology, just like what we're on here. But there's been some new innovations that are available, speed networking becoming super popular, and just giving these kind of defined areas in your agenda to say, hey, time to go meet the audience. And you can have these, rapid ways to meet people. I know I went to one virtual event, and in the span of 9 minutes, I had conversations with people in Indonesia, London, and Pakistan. All product managers. It was a product management conference that offered super great insights, but all in 9 minutes, I was able to have those conversations. Now, maybe we want to get the conversation started in a specific area. So you can look at video discussions, but based on different topics. So the topic here might be UX design or a meet and greet available on different days. And I can actually preview who's actually in that room. And it might be a small conversation, 5 or 6 people, so that everybody gets to participate, and then join that conversation for as long as you want, and hop out of it. So it's more of that organic conversation versus that hi, my name is, because it's really about a specific subject matter. So these are just different ways to incorporate a more dynamic set of programming, right? It's not going to all just be breakout sessions. Giving that dedicated time for people to meet and interact, even when they're all not physically there together, is going to be really important. Now, when we think about the return of in-person, we still need to think of the virtual audience the same way. And so the hybrid events has been a very popular term, and we're convinced it is going to be a path forward, the path back to in-person events, right? There's ongoing health and safety concerns. We're still seeing limited, if not non-existent, corporate travel budgets and corporate travel policies, marketing budgets that are used to send people to man a booth or a sponsorship. Still plenty of venues with capacity limitations in terms of how many they're willing to hold to run a safe event. And for certain, still uncertain, I don't know why I said for certain, still uncertain global travel restrictions as borders opening, closing with sometimes 1-2 days notice. And so to accommodate that international audience, it's going to be important to make sure that you offer that virtual component as well. Now, there's also the big potential for that multiplier effect. We saw events that these are just a hypothetical event where in 2019, you may have had 2,000 attendees at an event. In 2020, most of our customers were seeing 3, 5, sometimes 10x growth with that purely virtual event. But now, what if I can kind of combine? We're definitely seeing smaller events this year in 2021 as it relates to in-person, but being able to extend back to that same virtual audience that you captured in 2020 is a big opportunity. And then you can slingshot into 2022 with the same reach you had in person, with that high impact face-to-face experience, with that added reach around content sharing to the additional 7,500. So if you think about your event as a platform, right, the platform can get so much bigger with that added virtual reach. This event operations director at a market intelligence agency, I think, said it well. You're able to have that level up of that intimacy of in-person, but offer the thought leadership and the content to as many people as you possibly can. Now, what hybrid is not, and these are some of the things that I fear a lot of organizers are going to run into this year, right? Putting a camera in the back of the room or up on a balcony and letting other people watch. Letting your virtual audience watch that in-person event and watch those in-person attendees go to an event, that's not going to be a recipe for success. It's something we've grown used to in this virtual world, something that Hollywood calls the close-up effect. It's one of the big differences between, say, Broadway theater and the movies, is that director can get right in the face of the audience. And that's something we've all grown accustomed to in virtual events, and that we are all, give or take, 18 inches away from each other, right? Or you as the audience, you're 18 inches away from me, the speaker. So what we don't want to have is a big downgrade, right? A virtual attendee that attends a hybrid event, doesn't want to be looking from 100 feet away. They want to have that first class experience. And so really it's going to be one event, but it's going to boil down to 2 different experiences. And we use an example of sports, and that, yeah, it's 2 teams, 1 outcome, but the experience in the stadium is very, very different from the experience of someone at home. And when you think about the quality of production, that while we had that close-up effect, we've been able to do it with relatively inexpensive equipment, right? A web camera, maybe a ring light, maybe a nicer microphone. Of course, I've got some of those things going on today, but that's not going to cut it when it comes to producing a live stream from a venue, right? You're going to need more than just a ring light to light that notoriously dark breakout room. From a sound perspective, you can't just use AirPods or Apple headphones and a basic webcam. And can you get away with just using Zoom or something along the lines of the Livestream Production tools I was talking about, or do you need something more professional, right? And so if you're going to achieve broadcast quality production, you need to invest in lighting, in cameras, likely multiple, in sound. and actual live stream production that can switch between the various camera angles and the video on demand and the various microphone inputs that you might have from multiple speakers right there in the room. And there's going to be an opportunity now to create that sense of shared experience, that sense that your audience member, whether they're virtual or in person, that they're a part of something greater than maybe immediately meets the eye. So can you create that sense of shared experience between those in the room and those at home through things like polling, chat, Q&A, right, where everybody's kind of contributing to that interactivity between the speaker and the audience. So that might be through a mobile app, it might be through a web-based experience, or some mixture of both, but you want to make sure that they're all part of the same thing. So we've seen some organizers pursue, hey, one solution for my virtual audience, a different solution for my in-person, but you lose that opportunity to have a truly shared experience between those two audiences. So when we think about the new opportunities that are uncovered with virtual, I think we're going to find ourselves in this new era of live engagement. We'll have programs that are composed of in-person, virtual, hybrid events. We're going to realize that we're spinning off a lot of content from these events. And so we're going to have a more and more of a focus on how do we connect people with that on-demand content on their own time as well. So kind of as an extension of truly live engagement. So content activation, it extends the timeline of each event. It may be a great hook to draw people in. Hey, we've got the highlights from past events. Oh, wait, here's some more upcoming events that you might want to participate in as well. You might even want to monetize access to that content library, depending on what the goals are for your organization. And you have the opportunity to have a single source of truth for live engagement. So whether that's website activity, whether that's clicks and views and duration watched online, to the real world attendance as somebody walks up to a booth for an exhibitor or walks into a session door. If you can centralize that attendee journey data, there's a lot of new ways to activate it. It might start with scoring. So, hey, who are my most passionate audience members? Maybe I want to start segmenting them so I can target specific events, specific future content to them. I can start to personalize their experiences. So the more that marketers start to think of events as a channel, and these might be virtual events, they might be in person, they're going to want to treat that channel like they do all other marketing channels, digital channels. They're going to want to make sure that they've got a consistent data pipeline, that they have data integrity, that they're maintaining data privacy and those types of policies they have across the board. But most importantly, that they're able to personalize that experience as well. And so, some of the things to put signal to noise, right? This can generate millions of data points for every single event. How can I understand what that means, right? Without perusing through millions of rows of data in an Excel sheet. So there's so many different points of engagement that you can track and understand and score in unique ways, both for your in-person and your virtual events. You can even leverage that real-time data pipeline to incentivize deeper engagement or specific types of engagement in the moment. Don't wait till the next event to change your content or your program, but actually kind of say, hey, if you do these things, you can achieve additional points. You'd be surprised how motivated people can get just by simply being awarded points. Now, virtual itself has really started to redefine or question the definition of an event. You see people realizing, hey, in the first month or two of an event, people took their conference format and they put it online. They said, I'm going to have 8 to 10 hours of programming for 3 days. And that's what the virtual event's going to look like because, hey, we only have 2 weeks to plan the thing. But then we started to realize, hey, there's new constraints here. So when we think about the constraints of an in-person event, you're pulling someone away from their home or their office, right? And that means something. That it means that you only have 2 or 3 days to program for that audience. Then they have to leave. And so with that, that means 8 to 10 hours of programming that we would have in a given day. Virtual, we can't ask 8 to 10 hours of someone for a day. Like we said, they're trying to balance other things at home, other things at work, and they're participating in limited ways for your virtual events. And so we saw a lot of organizations start to experiment with this multi-week or multi-month event format. Google Cloud Next was one. I think they went for like 10 or 12 weeks. Now, that might not be the way to go, right? You kind of lose that urgency of, hey, the event starts now, come and join. So where we think it's going to ultimately go is year-round live engagement programs, right? A series of events that people can participate to in shorter formats. And the reason that this is available now is really virtual changes the equation. It became really hard to scale an in-person events program such that you could put on enough events that were geographically close enough that when they were close enough to that single attendee, that attendee happened to have availability to go. And by the way, availability is more than just the hour of content you were producing or the 8 hours of content. You also needed to account for the travel time and all those types of things. So virtual makes it much more scalable. It eliminates the constraints of geography. It makes it less of an ask from attendees, so you have more attendee availability. And so you have a new opportunity for this live channel to play a much more impactful role along that customer journey, where in person you may have had a few touch points. Now, make no mistake, they're very high impact touch points, but now you can have constant ones where you can really build a relationship through this live channel with 5, 10, 20 points of engagement, where you're leveraging that power live, where you're getting a lot of focused attention from that customer or that prospect or that employee along the way. So it really is a paradigm shift. And then you start to think what you can do with all of these interactions that are happening throughout the year. Attendees are building connections, pretty powerful ones too. They're meeting people that are on the same learning path as them, the same career path as them. You're starting to understand who the most influential people are in your community. You might leverage those connections that people make, those influencers that you've identified, as social proof to say, hey, these people that you know, or that we all know at our events, they're going to be attending the event. You should too. And so there's this opportunity for recurring live engagement, recurring attendance to really build this year-round engagement program that's going to be high impact. So you could almost have a hub of events where people can find new events. They can see their past credits and certificates. They can see all the connections that they've made in the past, any videos that were relevant to past events, or any other information sharing that you could discover there, maybe even discuss in kind of a more asynchronous framework with discussion boards. So there's a lot of opportunities to really think of a year-round live engagement program that might look a little bit different than things we tried to do, right? We've seen these community sites with higher logic that have been impactful when maintained and things like that. But yeah, do you need people to be logging into those community sites all the time? Or is it more impactful just to have them come to 10 events a year that might be an hour? Some might be face-to-face, some might be virtual. It's going to take a different kind of team to execute on this. And we've seen organizations change how they think about events. We looked at that Forrester study that we did in February of this year. A lot of that event execution was happening kind of outside of the marketing practice, right? It wasn't even tied to a campaign, which is kind of that fundamental building block of how do you track performance of marketing tactics through different campaigns. Many of it wasn't tied. And it was tough to measure ROI, right? Was customer satisfaction or attendee satisfaction enough? Could we really map that impact to the business? And 59% no, they couldn't track that ROI. But now we've seen totally evolved partnerships. Paulina, who's actually on our team here at CVent, she was interviewed on a MeetingsNet article. So I took the quote because I thought it was really relevant. Let's look at that middle piece there, just about how they're so much more entwined from the event planners to marketing operations, right? That expansion of virtual and hybrid redefined how our planners tracked and measured event performance, how we utilize data to really track ROI. And there was a lot of lip service to it in the industry, but there's no doubt the pandemic accelerated it. The fact that events were now digital caught the attention of the whole marketing organization, and it reformed partnerships. In this new event landscape, the average B2B marketing budget, 24% is going to go towards events. And when you think about how important it is, 74% of our respondents said that it is the most important demand gen activity, and it's the best way to deepen relationships with customers. So, like I said, people are making big investments to make these changes, right? So if you look at what this question was, it said, what percent of people have dedicated resources to fully implement this change post-pandemic? So that's a big investment to say, hey, marketers and event managers are going to work towards common goals and KPIs. 46% of respondents said that that's what they were doing with dedicated resources. They're adjusting team makeup, workflows, content, day of activities to be more agile. They're focusing on personalization of each experience, and they're really starting to think of events in a programmatic format. That might be for virtual, hybrid, and in person all together. So there really is this evolution of the event marketer going here where they have the opportunity to be the owner of that live engagement channel, virtual, hybrid, in person. And if you think about that role of events along the customer journey from that MQL stage, SAL, sales qualified leads to opportunity creation, they can play that majority share at accelerating that sales pipeline. So if you want to think about some of the key takeaways from today, really virtual is here to stay. We don't really see it over the long term, virtual as a replacement for in-person. They're still going to have those high impact experiences, but the voice over the PowerPoint, especially for those higher impact, higher tier events, that's going to start to go away because Zoom fatigue is real. It's going to be a more dynamic event-like environment. And that's what's going to have success. Now, virtual is also going to be a tailwind, right? If you're able to get that expanded reach, touch points throughout the year, you're going to build a much higher likelihood that you're going to have a larger audience show up in person. Just think of the NFL, for example. If they didn't have every game on TV, do you think they'd be selling out stadiums and 30 plus teams around the country and have sold out games in London, every year? They wouldn't without that virtual reach. And so having that virtual reach is going to make it more likely that you get larger audiences, more demand for more in-person experiences. And it transforms that live engagement channel. It's not 1 or 2 touch points per year. It could be a constant source of engagement. And by using live, you're really getting people's share of attention, unlike any other format you've seen before. And this puts that event marketer in position to be the more influential than ever before. So those are the main touch points. I had the orange cat on my head. I figured I would also have him close out for me. So if does anybody have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Tina trying to get the start video to work. It's perfect for this webinar. So yeah, I do have some questions I can ask. By the way, I love that you did magic in the middle of the presentation. It was definitely, I think the key to successful webinars is magic in the middle. So
magic in the middle, yeah. I should have put that in the deck.
I appreciate the cat on your head. And I was trying to take a picture, but it went so fast. I was like, oh my God, his beard disappeared. And oh my gosh, there's a cat on his head. So if I knew how to do that for my meetings, it would be a lot more exciting, I'm sure. So we do a lot of virtual events, and we're sort of moving into the hybrid as well. And one of the benefits, I feel like sometimes there's these two tiers, right? You have the virtual and then you have the in-person, and you don't want to create inequity between the two because they're both so valued. So you don't want them to have this sort of FOMO as they're watching the in-person happening. And with in-person events, the networking component is so important. So
Sure.
For one of our upcoming conferences, we have networking in person, but then it's how do we, because people are already getting burned out online, and then how the complicated networking while these people are networking, do you watch people network? So with all those questions, how do you give the same value for attendees in that sort of virtual session when it comes to networking and really feeling engaged?
Yeah, so I think we're gonna have to be really thoughtful. Hybrid events are really challenging, right? So I talked about some of the constraints of the virtual audience versus the in-person audience who's gonna be there on site expecting jam-packed content, activities, networking, 8 to 10 hours a day. having a virtual audience sit there and participate in some of it, be out of some of it, but be expected to sit on their chair for 8 hours isn't going to work. So, there's going to need to be much more concise programming, right? I mean, even think of the golf tournaments, you tee off at 8 in the morning and the final group comes through at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. It's only on TV for 3 hours. They pick up coverage at 3 o'clock, right? And so we got to think through a totally different program for the virtual audience. The likelihood that they're going to engage with the in-person audience during the event is very slim, and because people spend a lot to go and be there, they want to interact face to face. But there's certainly a lot of opportunities to build into that maybe 3-hour programming block. Hey, we're coming to you from the main stage. We're going to go to a desk like we see on College Game Day, where they're talking from the expo hall. We're going to share some videos. We're going to have exclusive interviews for the virtual audience. And hey, in this 30-minute window, here's a chance for you to meet your fellow audience members through those different networking techniques. But all of that might happen in only a 3-hour window. And that agenda may look extremely different than the agenda that you put forth for the in-person audience. There could be some opportunities outside of the walls of the event start date and end date, though, right? So if you think about before the event, where people aren't physically on site and they're all kind of at home or working, there might be a chance to do virtual networking with that larger audience together, whether they plan to be there in person or not. I know for Connect, we're going to have opportunities the week before our event, which is August 1st through 4th, for our in-person audience to come online and network just virtually, so that hopefully they can meet some people from our virtual audience, but more importantly, they can meet people that are going to be there in person. They know who's going to be relevant, and then they can schedule time so that when they're there, they don't have to rely on meeting someone serendipitously in a cocktail line. They've already got 8 people lined up for who they want to meet with and have longer form conversations with when they get there. So you got to think about before, during, after. You kind of bring all your audiences together before and after. But then during, it probably is 2 separate experiences for virtual and for in-person. And there's going to be the opportunities. They're just going to be different.
Yeah, so about the virtual networking, because you said you can connect with people. So what sort of best tips, and then there's a question in the audience. What sort of best tips do you have to have like a really great virtual networking event? Because I'm sure a lot of people have attended these sort of networking events and they're just so all over the place. Sometimes you have to ask questions or play trivia games, or other times you're watching someone mix cocktails and there's like less interaction, you're just entering in chat. So what sort of have you seen in terms of what makes a successful virtual networking event?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has to be a call to action, right? I mean, the nature of an event is you're getting people to the same place at the same time together, right? So having some of the things that tend to fail is having networking opportunities that are kind of always on, spread throughout the event. So when somebody goes in, there's only a few people there, so then they're not excited about participating. So there's got to be that call to action first to say, hey, something's happening at this time. Everybody should be there at that time. Then when you're there, you think about, all right, what are the ways to make it more engaging? One of the ways to make it less engaging is inviting people into large rooms where they're not going to be likely to speak up, right? So can you get into that 5 to 6 person setting where people feel like they can have a voice and participate and say more than one thing and actually have a conversation? So it seems like that 5 to 6 person piece is the sweet spot. And that might be for more long form conversations around a topic. Is your goal to learn, or is your goal to network? So you may offer networking opportunities that are more about meeting as many people as fast as possible and uncovering people you might want to have a long conversation with later. So that might look a little different too. So you might have a dedicated program around more networking versus more longer form discussions with experts that want to talk and share their expertise or learn from each other. Those probably need to happen in more of those 5, 6, 7 person, whether they're breakout rooms or little discussion rooms. There's different ways to do it. But that's where you kind of got to think, what's the format? What's the call to action? But I think those are some of the key things I've seen work in other virtual events.
Okay, great. So we have a question. Are there any trends in making webinars appealing specifically to older audiences such as boomers? And when I ask this question, I just think of this maybe isn't a boomer, maybe, but the cat on the cat guy. Remember the guy who's I feel
Right.
like that would make it more appealing. And you put a cat on your head. That's my response. It's not my show, but that's what I would. More appealing would be magic tricks. I think that's the answer. But McNeil, I'm sure people want to hear your answer. So how do you make it more
Sure.
for the audience?
Sure. I mean, I think you got to make it easy. So, I mean, some of the more the live streaming technologies and things like that, what we've seen be more prevalent, they don't require downloads. They don't require complex audio setup. Literally, you can click here, log in, start watching, without 5 or 6 different steps to get there. I mean, so that's maybe the more obvious one. I think also just increasing the production quality. So to get to something that we expect from TV, you got to start thinking of it in that stance, right? So without having to do anything, I'm having compelling, ever-changing, different layouts, video on demand, different speakers, and bringing that dynamism so it is just more consumable and it commands attention. I think that's best practice across the board. But just those things alone make it a more compelling experience. Then you can start to think about, okay, how can we get to that next level? People that want to engage maybe aren't quite comfortable. We used to have this, well, we still do. A best practice in events was sending that know before you go email. So here's everything you need to know, and read this big long email, and here's the things you'll know of the dress code and how to get onto the Wi-Fi and where to go to check in and all those things. Can we do these pre-event things in more of a live stream format and actually kind of coach people through? Here's what the experience is going to be. Here are the opportunities. Here's how to use them. So we've seen people moving to video to kind of train people on how they're going to experience the event. And that's been very popular. We've seen a lot of our customers doing that, and they're getting those videos out ahead of the event, making them super easy to access, consume, understand. And that versus saying, hey, click on this thing and then figure it out. That won't resonate, and you won't get the same engagement levels without making that investment to almost kind of orient and train your audience a little bit on what to expect.
Yeah, before we went to Cvent, we used a provider, and it was almost, you had to train people how to use it. It was like step 20, and you're just thinking, I'm frustrated. So that whomever is showing up is also equally frustrated and trying to find stuff. And I've had issues with other platforms too, even as a speaker and as an attendee, and it's just frustrating. So
right.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So what is your, there goes my dog. What is your favorite technology trend that's come out of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the best things that's been there has been the live stream production. Just getting to have web-based technology that allows you to create these broadcasts that have the lower thirds, or really kind of makes you feel like you're a TV show producer, but in a much more accessible way. There's been some new technologies that have enabled that really weren't available for a variety of reasons until about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. So that's been exciting, right? Where people talk about Zoom fatigue, but a great way to combat that is to up level that production. And you don't need to have 10 years of AV experience to do it now, right? There are these kind of simple to use tools that make it easy to pop a graphic on a screen, to have that nice lower third, to when somebody's speaking for a long time, make them go full screen instead of always seeing the 8-person layout. It just adds that sense of dynamism and movement. So, every 60 to, I think in news, they say, your layouts and everything needs to change every 60 to 90 seconds to really command that attention and stay. Doesn't mean you need a new speaker every 60 to 90 seconds, but it does mean you need something changing on the screen. So those technologies that have come out, have been pretty exciting, just to really change how we're able to present live streaming to our audiences.
Okay, great. Waffles, my dog is quiet for a second, which is good. Maybe. So what do you suggest for learning other production techniques to take a presentation beyond the slide deck? So you talked about just even changing camera and just upping production quality, but what sort of resources would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways, a lot of things we've experimented with, which is just changing the format, like the whole presentation, even if it's 30 minutes, doesn't need to be the same format. So you can mix everything from a back and forth panel discussion for 8 minutes. I know my own sessions at some of the user conferences, I've done Q&A back and forth between me and two speakers. I've done a 10-minute presentation. I've added in some video on demand content to make sure that that's there, which a lot of people were scared about how to incorporate video into a live stream, and will it work, and will they hear it, and will they see it? But I think that's, people have gotten comfortable with that. And then incorporating audience members into the Q&A is also something that can be done through just like the Q&A feature we have today, or even finding out ways to maybe invite some of those people that ask the question onto the stage and ask them in their own voice. And that kind of just adds a little bit of dynamism, kind of breaking through that third wall, saying, yeah, no, we're going to bring somebody up and they're going to ask the question live. So it just keeps it moving. I think those are some of the best practices. Now, then you start to talk about, all right, well, what is it going to need to do? That's for kind of a fully remote event. But if you're a hybrid, how do you get that high level production from a venue? And that can be really, really challenging, right? If you've got one camera, a relatively dark room, you got to figure out how the screen is shared in a first class way, how the speaker is shared, likely from multiple video perspectives, how you consistently get sound from your videos on demand, your mic packs, any videos that you're playing in the room. There's a lot of new things to think through for live stream production from a venue. And my recommendation there is really to work with an agency at that point, who's experienced in live stream production on site. Cvent, we do a lot of getting that content to the audience and making an experience once it gets there. When it comes to producing from a venue, there's a lot of unique challenges you need to be thinking through. I know I ended up speaking at a hybrid event a couple of weeks ago in Philadelphia. We worked through those challenges, and the 2.5 hours right before the audience got into the room made it super successful. But there's just more moving pieces when it comes to trying and produce that hybrid live stream.
So, for example, like what sort of challenges? Like, what do you see that
Yeah. So for example, you have a laptop that controls your PowerPoint. And if there's a video embedded in that PowerPoint, when you click on it and the video plays, well, you need to make sure that audio that's piping into the sounds in the room isn't getting reverb back to the audience. In fact, you should actually play that video totally separately with a different audio source, different video source. So what we would do is literally cut to that on-demand video just for our virtual audience. They wouldn't be receiving anything from the room for those 2 minutes, and then we bring them back. So that's just one example where you have to think about how the screen is presented to your audience at home. How is the screen presented to your audience in the room? How is the speaker presented? Of course, they typically can see the speaker. The audience at home, you might have 3 different cameras that you're switching between close-ups and wide shots and back of the room shots. So yeah, I mean, it's video, it's presentations, it's people. How does the sound and the visual happen for all 3 of those? And those are kind of how you got to break it down and make sure you have a good strategy for that. And we did have people that were like, oh, can I just add a video that you're going to be able to incorporate? I'm going on stage in 5 minutes. And we're like, well, you realize we needed a strategy for the room. We needed it for here. And we can't accommodate for those last minute ads like you might have been able to do just quickly if it was just an in-person event.
And so someone asked, do you have any specific recommendations of, like, we know Cvent for hosting events, but do you have any recommendations for any presentation or software or any apps that are really helpful and useful?
Yeah, so presentations are always interesting, presentation software for that matter. Generally, your speakers are going to want to use what they want to use. So it's tough to get them into a tool that's foreign to them, especially when they're not an employee of yours, right? That you're not saying, hey, you need to use this across the year. You're just saying, I need you to use this for this one presentation, one event. So it's very challenging to put presentation software in. So if somebody built something in PowerPoint, yeah, okay, if you want to have them upload it into your software and just click next, they'll probably be okay with that. But if you want them to use Prezi when they're used to using PowerPoint, that's not going to probably be okay. I personally love a software called Beautiful.ai. So my whole presentation, I didn't need my marketing graphics team's help to build that. I built it on my own, and it took not a lot of time to build a pretty nice looking presentation. So I use those. And then, you've got all your audience engagement technology. Many times it's baked into virtual event platforms. Of course, Cvent, has our own Q&A, polling, chat, but sometimes people prefer to bring their own in there. And then you're also thinking about accessibility. So do you have live captions? Do you have multilingual captions, also known as subtitles? Do you have interpreters? So you're going to have different audio tracks. And how would you potentially handle interpretation? So for those that are thinking about international reach and accessibility, you might be using third-party tools. We've partnered with 3Play Media to help with a lot of those things, but certainly there's other companies like Interprify, amongst others. I'm blanking on names that are really popular when you need those multilingual audio tracks. So I literally want to hear someone say the words in a different language. So yeah, there's a lot. We've tried to bring as much as we can into our technology stack, but we can't build everything, and we're happy to kind of recommend different ones that you can tie into that experience.
Yeah, I'll have to check out beautiful.ai. That's the first time I heard of it when you sent the presentation, but it looked really great. So, and it seemed like the video played seamlessly, which doesn't necessarily happen with other platforms.
It makes it pretty easy to build a great looking presentation without having to do days of back and forth with your creative team. So that's why I like it. I can be a lot more agile in putting together decks and presenting them.
Oh, great. Is there anything before we close that you wanted to add, or anything words of wisdom you would like to impart everybody with?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think adding virtual on to everyone's plate, people that used to run in-person events, has certainly been a challenge, right? It's a whole nother skill set to learn and be an expert at. Certainly with challenges come opportunities. To have such a varied skill set and make such a bigger impact, on an organization. Certainly our goal at Cvent is to make sure that we can try to make it so you don't have to learn two sets of things and technologies. And so we've tried to build it all in one cohesive platform to run live events and in-person events and hybrid events all in one place. But that's something we're super inspired by. These are huge challenges. We're making big investments to try and enable you to take advantage of that opportunity.
Okay, great. All right. So McNeil, I wanted to thank you so much for being here with us today. Really appreciate it. And the magic show was, definitely a highlight for me. So
oh yeah, always get a little bit of magic. You have the famous
yes,
cat video.
Yes,
you can do that one too. There's so many good ones.
I love it. See, this is amazing. And so that one's good too. See, I don't even know how to do all this stuff. I think one of my friends did a mustache, and I thought that was brilliant. So
yeah, no, they're fun. This is all through an app called
chatting how much they like this. So
it's an app called Snap Camera that you can download onto your computer. It's actually produced by Snapchat, and you can do it and then just choose a different camera input to get it. So you don't need any special hardware to do it or anything like that.
Okay, good. I'll have to add that to the technology repertoire with beautiful AI. So there you go. But thank you so much, McNeil. And then big thanks to Cvent for being our partner. They power all our events, and they're really great to deal with. So this will be recorded. We will send out links and resources. And I believe there's a survey at the end, and you can get a gift card or something. So, but thank you all so much for being here today. And we look forward to seeing you at another webinar or in-person hybrid event soon. Have a good one.
Thanks, Tina. Thanks, everybody.